What's up, everybody? We're back from Worlds. We almost got there. Very close. Very close. Thank you all for the congratulations and all that kind of stuff. Thank you all for rooting. We'll talk about it a little bit today. Couldn't quite make it, but it was still a good weekend. And yeah, I'm glad to be back. The worst thing is probably the fact that we have to think of something for the YouTube titles. We can't just call it World Champ anymore. We just have to be like former World Champ or something like that. But overall, it's fine. I'm sure you've all seen what happened last weekend. We got second place at Worlds. We unfortunately lost the finals. I've just been trying to relax the last couple of days because not only the last weekend, but the last couple of weeks have been very stressful for me between working and also, you know, juggling Worlds prep and all that other stuff. Trying to get back into it. Has Emre gotten a brace for his back from injuring it, carrying too hard? Emre did great this weekend. Emre was phenomenal, especially on day one. You can never talk bad about Flu ever again, you know that? Oh, I can, and I will. But the Worlds format is a special kind of format. But we can talk about our lineup, I suppose. We always knew we were going to play Fire. My feeling about this format, where you have 3 people bringing 2 decks each, so 6 decks total, I think it's very, very unlikely that you're going to find 6 equally strong decks. So like the whole idea of I'm going to play this deck sometimes and then this deck some other times, basically like 50-50 or whatever, I don't think it applies to the World Championship format. I think it is much more efficient to build your first 3 decks as powerful as possible and then have backup decks that maybe cover certain matchups or certain weaknesses of the deck. For example, we didn't play Yubel. With a shared card pool, I felt like there was no way to build Yubel optimally. First of all, you would be forced to share Cult by the Grave, but even if you share Cult by the Grave, your Yubel deck won't have Crossout Designator, for example, or rather, it might not have enough hand traps in your other decks, or you might not be able to run enough outs to max seed like the way you would want to. Combined with the fact that honestly, I didn't even feel like Yubel was that strong compared to other decks. One very common approach that you could take for this format, you could play one deck with a lot of hand traps, and then you could play one deck with a lot of board breakers. So basically, you're going to play a hand trap build at full power, and then you're going to play a board breaker build at full power. Yubel is relatively weak to board breakers, which Fire is not. We didn't feel like Yubel was performing as well in our testing. The card we decided to share was Infinite Impermanence, simply because we felt like Cult by the Grave was going to be the most common shared card, so Imperm being our shared card would be very good against that because it's a card that Cult by the Grave cannot counter, even though we didn't play it in the Tearlament deck, but in all other decks, I think we had Imperm. Was it always clear you play Fire, or did you discuss on that as well? So here's the thing. You guys know I don't like this deck. I mean, I like the Fire King cards, but you guys know I don't like Snake Eye, right? I didn't want to play Fire, and I tried other things in order to replace it, but I simply couldn't find anything that was better. But it felt like going into Worlds, there was no way we couldn't have this deck. At the end of the day, it performed kind of mid. I think I went 50-50 with this deck pretty much. I feel like I got a little unlucky with it, to be fair. Like most of the time I went first, I was winning. Going second, I was winning some games, but I went second way more than I went first. I don't know what my coin flip win rate was. I didn't actually count it. 28% was my coin flip win rate? Really? That's crazy. So the fact that I had a 28% win rate on the coin flip, I think I went 50-50 with this deck is pretty good. I had a 0% win rate against Branded, which was crazy. First of all, I played against Branded, I think 4 times. I got grassed 3 times, I think. There was 2 games in a row where I went second into Branded. I got max seed. I went for game. In round 3, I think it was against the Brazil team, they were playing 60 card Branded. Obviously, you go for game against 60 card Branded under Maxi. They drew 4 cards, I think, and they drew Nib after having already drawn Maxi and Imperm. So I lost that game. And then the very next round, I go second into Branded again. On their turn, I use a Kieran in my hand. They Maxi me. On my turn, they Maxi me again. This time around, because they went for Verte, they are on 6,000 life points. I go for game again. I have game through 1 Bestial, and they draw both Bestials, which they usually only play 2. They drew the one of Magnamut and the one of Serenir. I had game through 1 Bestial, not through 2 Bestials. And they said there was a way to play around Bestial. Possible. I'm not saying I played that game perfectly, but it was definitely frustrating. My Branded games are very frustrating. I went second, I think, in all of them. But it's okay. You know, like, I'm not complaining. For all the bad luck I had, Emre was sitting next to me just having the time of his life. I'm the one tryharding, getting max seed, comboing, having to figure out, like, how to even play the game. I look over to Emre and he's just like singing the payphone song, dropping shifter on people. It's crazy. And that's the advantage of a team tournament like that. If you're getting unlucky, there's always a chance that your teammates can win. Emre had a phenomenal day 1. Me and Quantal just had a terrible time. Quantal resolved his first max C. I think it was round 4. round 4, which was like his 12th or 13th game of the tournament, he resolved his first Max C going second. And you know what happened? Bro got FTK'd by Dark Strike Fighter. In the first Max C game, he had the entire day. So yeah, anyways, we were always going to play Fire, and we were also always going to play Tier. I didn't feel like you could have had 3 decks that were hand trap decks like Fire King, Centurion, and Voiceless as your primary decks. Like, it just didn't really work out with the non-engine. You can share Imperm, but you can't share stuff like Nibiru or Effect Veiler or Ghost Mourner or whatever. Like, you'd just be playing very suboptimal hand traps, and we didn't want to play suboptimal hand traps. I felt like Droll Lockbird was a very hit or miss hand trap, for example. Ghost Mourner was a very hit or miss hand trap. And like I said earlier, it just makes more sense, in my opinion, to play hand trap decks at full power and then play one of the decks in the format that has a full board breaker / engine approach, right? Which are basically branded or tier. Using a deck like tier or branded in this format just gave you a lot of flexibility in how to build your other decks, because this Tearlament deck basically takes no card away from other decks. And the other reason obviously was because it's good into Maxi. The reason why we didn't pick Branded, you guys know I tested Branded a lot. I got Nesh on the stream to teach me some Branded. At the end of the day, I didn't feel like it was reliable. I didn't feel like the deck was consistent enough. I was bricking a lot with it. I was not able to play through Imperm or Effect Veiler a lot of the times. And then obviously Ash was going to be everyone's share. Some people in this tournament got very lucky with Branded, but overall, I don't feel like Branded performed very well. I think only one team in top 4 had Branded. They won against me, all of them, but I don't think they won a lot of the other matches. And then I think the most interesting part of the lineup is Emra's 2 decks. Centurion was a really good deck for me in testing. I laddered with it a lot. The combination of Bestials plus Ghost Ogres makes this deck really good into basically any deck that isn't Snake Eye Fire King. I think it was very likely that most of the Fire players in the tournament wouldn't switch, right? When they see Emra playing Centurion, they would just queue the Fire deck into Emra every time. That's when I said, hey, do you think you can make Blue good into Fire? And Emra was like, yeah, I can. You just have to like use Snatch Steal and Change of Heart to take their Apo going second, and then you cook them because Apo stop their other stuff. You don't care about Princess, you don't care about Maxi or anything like that. Just take their Apo and cook. Obviously, we played the Cosmic Cyclone for Fire King because you can just Cosmic the field spell and then their board is gone. This deck basically was only here because Emra's other deck was good into everything but Fire King, and this deck was basically just made for Fire. So that was the logic behind Emra's lineup, and I think, if anything, Emra's lineup was the edge we had. I think it was the thing that we did better than other teams, is pick those 2 decks together, because I didn't see a lot of Centurion, and I don't think there was a single fluke. Not for 100%, you know, this deck can still brick. You know, we gave it all of the pots. You know, the Centurion deck, it didn't get any pot of prosperity or anything like that. Give us maximum odds of not bricking, right? Obviously, sometimes you do brick, it happens. But the overall win rate against Fire in our testing was still very good and positive. And then for Quantal's secondary deck, honestly, we didn't really know what deck we would not queue tier into. Like, Tearlament seems fine into everything. Like, it's kind of got like a 50-50 matchup into most decks. It's got a very solid win rate going first, and going second, it's like, okay, well, Maxi Droplet are your win conditions, basically. I was never convinced by Voiceless Voice, and I felt like most of the games he was going to play tier anyways. I just told him, whichever secondary deck you think makes sense, if there's any matchup you don't like queuing into with tier, just build a deck for that and it's fine. The only matchup that he didn't like were like decks that were built with a lot of Imperms and Effect Veilers, and he wanted to play the Voiceless Voice against those. And also against the Bestial deck, it sounds counterintuitive because Voiceless is also not insane into Bestials, but if you know there's Bestials, Voiceless has ways to play around it, whereas Tearlament doesn't really have ways to play around it. Like, Tearlament has to go for fusions, and if they have Bestials, they have Bestials. This deck, you can just be like, okay, well, I'm gonna go for a more moderate opener, maybe not tribute my low, instead tribute a card from my hand, and just go like that, right? But overall, the Voiceless Voice deck didn't perform that great for us. I didn't think it was that great. Quantal was testing it, Quantal was comfortable with it, and I think that's important too. I think he brought it twice, and I think he lost twice, but I also think he lost both of the coin flips he played the deck in. And as you can see from the list, with the non-engine it's playing, it doesn't have a lot of hand traps, so it's not great going. From what you guys are saying, other teams also didn't perform well with Voiceless. I don't know. In a non-shared card environment, I think Voiceless is pretty good because you can just put the best possible non-engine into it. At Worlds, it was difficult because it was our backup deck, so it was never going to be prioritized, like where we put our non-engine. So this is why it ended up this way. For me, basically, I knew that I would be able to play this deck into basically every other deck because Fire can beat everything in the format. I didn't need to really cover a weakness for my deck. So I was just trying to look for maybe a potential edge to gain. I think this deck does have a 50 to 55% win rate against most decks in the format, but maybe there's a deck where I can get a higher win rate out of it. That deck was Yubel. Yubel was the deck that I expected a lot of people to have, and I think Yubel was a very exploitable deck, which was another reason why we didn't bring it. And the deck I built, it was specifically aimed at Yubel, and it was also specifically aimed at stun deck. Like maybe someone was building a counter deck to Fire King with like a stun deck. I could see that, right? That was realistic. And some people did bring stun. And so I wanted something to punish stun. This deck destroys stun. But this deck, more importantly, completely annihilates Yubel. This list is something you can never play in ranked. This deck only works at Worlds because it's a deck that I never have to play if my opponent doesn't have Yubel. I always play my Fire deck, right? Fire is my first deck. I think I played this lab deck only 2 times. So the idea is basically, if you have access to Heavy Storm Duster or Unending Nightmare, the Yubel deck almost has basically no win condition in Master Duel if you just pop the Nightmare Pain. And the only thing you have to worry about is cards like SP and Access Code Talker and Chaos Angel. Those are the only 3 cards that even apply any sort of pressure on you, which is why you just focus your entire trap lineup on hitting those cards, right? That's why Black Horn of Heaven is here. That's also why Rivalry is here. You might think this card is not great against Yubel, but the Yubel deck just loses all the access to their extra deck under Rivalry. They can summon the Yubels and the Yamas and the Sharvaras or all that kind of stuff. You don't care about those. You just don't let them go into SP or access code. That's the key to the whole matchup. The reason why there's, for example, no Ariana in here, you just play into your opponent's cards with Ariana. Because your opponent is going to have an Appaloosa, maybe access to Samsara D Lotus or Phantom of Yubel for monster negates. They're going to play Effect Veiler. They're going to have Imperms. The idea is that those cards are completely dead against this deck. The same reasoning for Lord of the Heavenly Prison. What's the point of going second into Yubel when your opponent just makes an Appaloosa every time because you're not playing hand traps, and then you reveal Lord of the Heavenly Prison and your opponent goes, well, I'll negate it with Apple. You guys can try it if you want to play into Yubel with this deck. I think this deck probably has a 90 to 95% win rate against Yubel, going first or second. It doesn't matter. This deck basically has a 0% win rate into most other decks. The thing that was a little unfortunate with this deck, and I guess it's something that I should briefly mention, the whole deck list situation, because someone in chat is just asking, did you not use Gamma at all? Let me talk about Gamma for a second. The idea behind not playing Gamma. I was trying Gamma in Fire, but I felt like, first of all, this deck is 40 cards. Because the most frustrating thing to me in this deck the entire time I was testing were 2 things. Not drawing starters and getting Mag Seed. Those were the 2 biggest issues I had with this deck. That's why at some point in testing, I said this deck needs to be 40 cards or I'm not going to be happy. I need maximum odds to out Max C, and I need maximum odds to play through other hand traps or in general be able to play. The reason for 2 Kirins, I don't think it's that important to draw Kirin in this format because I expected the most common shared card to be Called by the Grave, which means that on average, you are playing against a lot less Imperms and Effect Veilers because most teams had 3 Veilers and 3 Imperms total for 6 decks. So that's why I felt like drawing Kirin was not that important. Obviously, it comes up in grind games. That only mattered a single time in the entire tournament. I think it's completely okay to play 2 Kirins. I really liked my hands this tournament with this deck, but it's just, I lost a lot of coin flips with this deck. I think going first with this deck, I only lost once, and going second, it was also solid. I think this list was pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. Any reason for more of the Snake Eye package? Okay, so Divine Temple was, in my opinion, another card that I played because I hated getting Max Seed in testing. I just hated searching an original and passing after. I really liked the idea of being able to go 1 extra special summon to make an IP and Divine Temple IP pass. Another thing that I also really liked was the ability to play through Nibiru with this card in certain lines. What a lot of people underestimate with Snake Eye Fire King and Master Rule at the moment, you can still do the normal Snake Eye combo. You don't have to do Fire King stuff. Just going for the Temple to be a little bit safe from Nibiru and just doing your normal Snake Eye combo ending on like Apple, Flamberge, IP Masquerena is good enough. What I was gonna say, the reason why I didn't play Gamma was because when I'm trying to build a 40 card deck, Gamma is a really inefficient card because I have to use 3 slots for only 2 good cards, basically, and I didn't like that, and it also didn't like how it included another brick in the deck. I didn't want to play Gamma, and so Emra was like, I could play Gamma in Centurion, but I also don't have to. Like, I think the other hand traps are also fine, and so I was like, okay, what if we do the following thing? What if we just don't play Gamma so that the opponents just don't know where it is, right? Because if they see Gamma in Emra's Centurion deck, then they don't have to play around Gamma anymore in my Fire King deck. But if they just don't see it, if they don't know where it is, they technically have to always respect it. That was my idea. Obviously, that idea went completely out of the window after all of the lists were being posted during round 1. So that was kind of unfortunate. The other problem was obviously the fact that as soon as anyone with a brain sees this deck, they would probably just stop queuing Yubel into me. And so I ended up just not queuing this deck a single time after the lists got public, except in top 4, because I was pretty sure that my Japanese opponent with Yubel was forced to queue Yubel, because their other deck was just terrible into fire. They had Yubel, and then they had a anti-stun lab deck. They couldn't risk me queuing fire, and so I was pretty confident they would queue Yubel. They did queue Yubel, and so this deck annihilated. Even if I didn't draw a starter for the first 2 or 3 turns, it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, this deck didn't get to farm Yubel as much as I wanted, simply because I figured it was too risky with most people knowing I have this deck. And I talked to Jesse after the finals, and he said, yeah, Raymond was not going to play Yubel into you. But that's the thing. At some point in the tournament, if people are scared to queue Yubel into you, that can be somewhat of an advantage, right? Because now they're playing early into my fire deck instead of Yubel, which is definitely an easier matchup. Long story short, basically, if you guys want my opinion on the deck lists getting public, there was always going to be information that gets out because the replays are in the game, right? We were all basically expecting whenever we play a deck, all of the cards that we show would be public, right? That is what I went into this tournament expecting. I did not anticipate the full list being out there as soon as you queue a deck once, which is a completely different story. And had I known that would have been the case, we would have definitely built our decks in a different way. I would have probably not built a counter Yubel deck because there's no point to that. I also probably would have put Gamma somewhere because the whole idea of, well, they have to guess where the Gamma is because they've never seen it also goes out of the window. I think it was unfortunate. It shouldn't have been done. I think it is okay to play a tournament with open deck lists as long as all the competitors know about it beforehand and can build their decks accordingly. Because the way this went, we didn't expect this to happen. I didn't even know this was possible. So we built our decks with those kind of ideas in mind, right? We built our decks with some hidden information in mind. We wanted to make some meta calls based on our opponents not knowing exactly what's going on, and that just didn't really happen. Those are the decks we played. I had a miserable day 1. Jack had a miserable day 1, but Emra had a great day 1 and carried us to the top 4. We were able to beat Ask in top 4, which was also a run back from last year. It was not the exact same team as last year, but the same captain. We beat Heroes Future in top 4, and then we lost to Jesse's team in the finals, which obviously I would have really liked to go back to back. I can't say I wasn't sad after. I also feel like it's okay. You know, one of the things I learned a long time ago playing a card game like this competitively is that it's not always your day. Last weekend, it was not our day. Instead, it was Jesse's. So the only thing left to do is to congratulate them on their amazing performance that weekend. They are also very deserving world champions. I was very happy for Ryan, especially after seeing how much it meant to him after the finals, but also Jesse and Raymond obviously deserved it. And I'm just happy to be part of this back-to-back same finals storyline. You know, we were fortunate enough to win it last year, which I'm very thankful for. We didn't get quite lucky enough this year, but that's okay. Congratulations once again from the bottom of my heart to Ryan, Raymond, and Jesse, deserving world champions in my opinion. We'll try to run it back next year. I get to grind duelist cups again. I also get to maybe focus on the TCG a little bit more because I've told you guys this last season. I do want to go back to the TCG worlds at some point because it's the one thing that I haven't done yet. That is something I am genuinely excited for. Thank you in general for cheering us on during the weekend. I was a little quiet this time on Twitter. I was just like kind of focused on the tournament and having a good time with people I haven't seen in a long time. I saw all of you guys cheering us on and all that kind of stuff, so appreciate that. Also, it was always destiny for me to not become first, but rather be second, third, or fourth. The prize card for second, third, and fourth is a Cyberse. So I really wanted it. Why would I want a dragon if I can have a Cyberse? Like, come on. Huh? I know the universe is content-brained. Sunday morning, I walk into the venue, I look at the prize card, I read Cyberse. I'm like, yo, is this second or first? And I don't know who told me, but someone said, yeah, that's for second place. I'm like, God damn it. I know what's gonna happen. Anyways. Oh, yeah.